Reunited. It was Halloween in Hinton, West Virginia. I was doing one last inspection on the 1522 before we headed out. We were running with a custom whistle made by my high school's geometry class. It was a hooter based off of the one used by the Norfolk and Western. Everything looked all set, and I climbed up into the cab and into what I like to call my office chair. But running this engine never seemed like a job, but a pleasure. I felt happy when running it, even in the most stressful of situations. I looked down at a paper I was holding. It wasn't the way bill or even the timetable. It was a letter. From them. I met them during an excursion we did in Japan, where I had the 1522 shipped over and hauled by truck to a railroad that was willing to have it run there. One of them came up to me while I was greasing the rods and asked about the differences between American and Japanese steam. I then met the others soon after. I couldn't help but fall in love with them. They were pleasant to be around, and after the excursion was over, I stayed a few days longer to spend time with them. When I left, I was surprised to learn that they were moving in with me. I never understood why they decided to. They have everything in Japan. Why did they want to move to a slowly dying town in the Midwest? I then looked back up at the controls and then through the window. The signal was green. I looked back, and I saw a green flag waving in the distance. I got the train underway for an overnight run to St. Louis, so we weren't interfering with freight traffic. It was 7:15. I felt the fire on my left side and the cold wind on my right. I knew soon that both sides would be warm, and the comfort of my home in their company. We made a brief stop in Huntington and then again in Chicago before heading on to the Lincoln Corridor. We hit 90 miles an hour through Joliet, a speed that would not decrease until Springfield. At least, that's what I thought. I felt something was off. Something felt unresolved. I checked everything when we stopped in Chicago, and everything was all right. It was 9:30, and I was starting to push myself and the 1522 to the absolute limit. I wanted to be in St. Louis by 11:30 and home by midnight. Most of the passengers were asleep, and me and the crew were emptying Provigil bottles left and right. I soon noticed the speedometer read 85 miles an hour. I wasn't too worried. We were ahead of schedule. I felt something slide down the back of my neck. I turned my head around, thinking it was one of their hands, but realized it was just the wind blowing into the cab. I looked back at the speedometer, 82 miles an hour. I then looked at the water level, which was normal. I looked at the boiler pressure, which was also normal. I was hoping to get to Springfield as soon as possible to try and mend the problem. I then saw the water level decrease rapidly. My cousin Tyler, who was the one firing, then turned to me. "It's the steam injector! It's burst!" I then notified dispatch we would be stopping at the nearest siding to try and do an emergency repair. This ultimately cost us 20 minutes. Before setting off, I heard voices run through my head.
"I'm sorry, Katusha. I wish he was here. I hope he's okay."
Hearing their voices just made me furious inside. Not at them, not at the engine, but myself. But I knew that I shouldn't give up. If Casey Jones ever taught me anything, is that you can still make it on time, even if you're worryingly behind. After we got off Springfield, we ran as fast as we could without derailing, which meant in a lot of areas, breaking the speed limit. All I could think about as we were speeding through the prairies were them, their hearts broken and scattered on the floor, in a silent and dark room with nothing but their thoughts. I must have stared off into space, as Tyler then yelled at me that a crossing was coming up. We were getting to the area where there was pretty much a crossing every mile. We would fly through each one, like stepping through a small puddle. It started raining quite hard, and it made it impossible to see even 100 feet ahead. We eventually arrived in St. Louis. It was 11:20. All I had to do was drive to my house, and my trip would be complete. I knew I had to drive fast, but there was still a downpour. I got into my Demon and hoped I'd be home before midnight. I hit traffic, which made me go into German mode for a little bit. It was 12:10 when I got home. I felt a sense of guilt when I stepped up to the door and inserted the key. I could just imagine their reactions. Katusha would probably shake me by the shirt. Darjeeling and Nona would be asking worryingly where the heck I was. Miho would just be glad I'm home and safe. And Maho, she would probably stare at me in shame. I turned the key and quietly opened the door. I didn't see or hear anyone or anything. I began slowly walking towards the living room. I peeked in. There they were. Their eyes were closed, heads tilted down. I never knew my heart could break so easily. I gave the wall a small knock. Within an instant, they looked up. The next thing I knew, I felt 10 arms around me. I never thought you'd come, I heard Matt say through the tears. None of them wanted to let go of me. I didn't want to either. What happened? Darjeeling asked. The steam injector burst, I said. It cost us 20 minutes. All 6 of us then went and spent the rest of our time awake talking about how our night went. Jet lag then kicked in on me, and the last thing I could remember from that night was resting on Maho's shoulder.